The shadow of Nazi Germany had long stretched across the Atlantic. It felt like a hot, rancid breath on America's neck. But it was the sudden, savage attack on Pearl Harbor that truly galvanized Jimmy Sheeran. The abstract threat solidified into an urgent, personal call to arms. Yet, his eagerness to serve was met with frustrating rejections. His colorblindness was deemed an insurmountable barrier by one branch after another. Then, a bold advertisement cut through his despair. It declared, "Jump into the fight!" It was a direct challenge, a promise of action. Jimmy, declaring, "I'm ready to jump," found his path. The military, desperate for men, overlooked his perceived flaw. They acknowledged his fierce desire to serve. 2 years of relentless paratrooper training followed. This training forged Jimmy into a soldier and bound him to his comrades. Burnie Rainwater was the stoic Cherokee. Lud Engelbrecht was the demanding but inspirational sergeant. Freddie Hoffman was his jump partner. Johnny Simpson was known as the philosopher. These men became his brothers. Their camaraderie was a crucible for the trials ahead. On the eve of D-Day, General Eisenhower's solemn address had left an indelible mark. It prompted many to seek spiritual solace, a quiet moment of reflection before the storm. Each man knew their mission. They were to jump 8 hours before the main invasion. They would secure vital bridges near Sainte-Mère-Église and disrupt German defences. Their lives, Lud had warned, might depend on remembering the simple password. It was flash and lightning, activated with a toy cricket. The night jump into Normandy was an immediate descent into chaos. The roar of German flak sounded like rain pounding a tin roof. It confirmed their worst fears. They had been sold out. The sky exploded with tracers and anti-aircraft fire, a deadly tapestry of red and green. "Go! Go! Go!" became a command to leap into a maelstrom. Was anyone truly prepared for what lay below? Jimmy's chute opened with a violent bang. Shrapnel tore through the silk, a terrifying prelude to landing. He landed ankle-deep in unimaginably cold swamp water. Disoriented, alone, and surrounded by the shouts of German soldiers, he clicked his cricket. He prayed for a friendly response. Lightning came, a beacon in the darkness. It was Freddie Hoffman, but their immediate situation was dire. Their rifles were jammed with mud, rendering them useless. The brutal reality of combat crystallized quickly. Captured with a small group of Americans, Jimmy witnessed a cold-blooded murder. A wounded soldier named Brown was executed. A German lieutenant, his eyes obsidian, ordered the execution. A Smiser submachine gun blasted a gaping hole in Brown's hip. The shock of this senseless act, the sheer earnestness of the war, ignited a burning desire to fight within Jimmy. Soon after, he too was captured. His idealistic vision of war was abruptly shattered. It was replaced by the grim realities of his new ordeal. The journey began with a brutal, barefoot march through the night. His feet became a mass of blood and small cuts. During a bombing raid, shrapnel sliced into his right wrist, leaving a throbbing wound. Kicked awake by a German soldier, he was packed into an open truck. He passed smouldering ruins and charred bodies. At a Gestapo-controlled courtyard, he was stripped and searched. His wallet, pictures of Lee, her wristband, and the precious St. Joan medallion were all confiscated. This left him heartsick and hollow. Confinement to a hayloft with runs digging into his bloodied feet offered no respite. Yet, amidst this dehumanization, a surprising moment of shared humanity emerged. A German sergeant speaking English showed Jimmy a photograph of his beautiful wife, Ute. He spoke of their unborn child. He expressed a personal dislike for his assignment. The sergeant insisted he fought for his family, not for Hitler. This challenged Jimmy's simplistic view of the enemy. It revealed the complex motivations that drove men on both sides of the conflict. The air in the makeshift prison hospital hung heavy with the cloying scent of stale bandages. It smelled of cheap disinfectant and the unwashed bodies of desperate men. Jimmy Sheeran, his wrist still throbbing from shrapnel, watched the German nurse. Her face was a mask of cold efficiency as she moved among the beds. She paused at a small table. A stack of American cigarette cartons, confiscated from new arrivals, sat there like a taunting monument. Her gaze swept over the gaunt faces of the prisoners. She lingered on their hollow eyes. Then she picked up a pack, slowly and deliberately. She peeled back the cellophane. The crisp crackle was agonizingly loud in the silent room. She lit one, inhaling deeply. The smoke curled from her lips in a languid stream. Then, with a faint, almost imperceptible smile, she crushed it out in an overflowing ashtray. She never offered a puff. It was a small act, but it twisted the knife of their deprivation. It was a calculated psychological torment that carved deeper than any physical blow. Every man understood. This was not about the cigarettes, but about control. It was about reducing them to begging animals. It was about stripping away their last vestiges of dignity. Jimmy clenched his fists. The memory of the American P-47 strafing their convoy was a burning coal in his gut. The indiscriminate slaughter of his comrades and Murray Goldberg's whispered fear for his Jewish identity fueled his resolve. The Germans were the bullies, and he had taken his last licking. The days blurred into a monotonous cycle of gnawing hunger. There was also the constant, life-threatening peril of disarming unexploded bombs. This grim task paradoxically forged unbreakable bonds among the men. They found brief, precious moments of humanity. They scavenged ham, beans, and wine from abandoned places. They shared meals that felt like banquets, a testament to their unwavering resourcefulness, but the Germans continued their psychological warfare. They staged propaganda films where emaciated prisoners fought over scraps. They paraded them through Paris to the Arc de Triomphe. This parade culminated in Jimmy's defiant act of spitting back at a collaborator. The journey was a descent into dehumanization. It extinguished the light in men like Goldberg, leaving them hollow. Finally, they were herded into the confines of old French boxcars. They were packed shoulder to shoulder. The air was thick with the stench of fear and despair. Goldberg's grim pronouncement echoed through the car. For every escapee, 10 would be killed. The threat hung over them like a shroud, yet Jimmy's keen eyes, sharpened by a lifetime of observation, had spotted it. It was a small, barred window covered by half-inch boards. It was a sliver of possibility, a fragile thread of hope in the suffocating darkness. He turned to Burnie, his voice barely a whisper. He asked the question that would change everything. "Do you want to try to escape?" Burnie's immediate, fierce "you bet your ass I do" solidified their desperate pact. An anonymous British paratrooper, a stranger with a family of his own, had pressed a hacksaw blade and a silk map into Jimmy's hand. It was a silent blessing. Under the cover of the train's rhythmic clatter, they began to work. The hacksaw blade, small and sharp, sang a quiet, urgent tune against the barbed wire. The half-inch boards, nailed tight, resisted their efforts. But slowly, painstakingly, they began to yield. The small opening they created allowed a trickle of fresh air. It was a tantalizing whisper of freedom, but the darkness was absolute. The boxcar was a symphony of shifting bodies and hushed breathing. As Jimmy strained against a stubborn board, a sudden, explosive sound ripped through the silence. A violent, uncontrollable sneeze came from the dark corner where another prisoner lay huddled. Time froze. Every muscle in Jimmy's body tensed. His heart hammered against his ribs. He heard the faint, metallic scrape of a boot on the gravel outside. He heard the murmur of German voices, closer now. He pressed himself against the rough wood, barely daring to breathe. The tension in the boxcar was almost unbearable. The voices passed, slowly fading into the train's rumble. They left behind a collective, shuddering exhale. They worked faster, fueled by the near miss. The opening was just wide enough for a man to squeeze through. 6 inches separated them from the outside world. Just as Jimmy was about to make his move, a shadow fell across the opening. A German officer, his face grim in the dim light filtering through the crack, had discovered their escape. His hand moved to his sidearm, a sharp intake of breath. There was no time for thought, only instinct. Burnie, a blur of motion, lunged forward. His powerful Cherokee hands clamped over the officer's mouth. Jimmy, driven by a primal need for survival, joined him. He was twisting, pushing, a desperate, silent struggle. The officer thrashed. A muffled gurgle escaped his throat. His eyes were wide with terror and surprise. It was brutal, raw, and utterly necessary. They held him, pressed him against the metal wall of the boxcar until his struggles ceased. His body went limp. It was a grim, morally complex act. It was born of desperation, not malice. But it would forever stain their souls. With the immediate threat neutralized, they moved. Jimmy, feeling like a human cannonball, squeezed through the opening. The wind tore at his clothes. He hit the ground hard. The impact was like a brutal tackle in a football game. He landed on a bed of large blue stones. Immediately, shots rang out, a deadly tattoo against the night. Another escapee, wounded, cried out, "Go!" "You can't wait. You have to go." The words were a knife in Jimmy's heart, but the imperative was clear: survival. There was no time for hesitation, no room for sentiment. They ran. Burnie and Jimmy split up from the others. It was a strategic decision in the flat, open field. Their destination was a distant, desperate hope: Switzerland. The light drizzle that began to fall felt like a blessing. It washed away the stench of the boxcar. It replaced it with the sweet, clean smell of nature. They were free for now, but the night held new dangers. The moral weight of their actions, the price of freedom, had just begun. The escape from the boxcar had plunged them back into a brutal freedom. Their bodies ached from the fall. Their minds still reeled from the violence of their desperate act. Bruised, starved and caked with mud and blood, Jimmy and Burnie navigated a landscape. Every shadow could conceal a German patrol. Every unfamiliar sound was a new threat. They had found temporary, fleeting relief, only to discover the chilling red swastika on a burgomeister's door. It was a stark reminder of the deep divisions festering beneath France's occupied surface. But then came the first glimmer of hope. The quiet courage of a Frenchman offered fresh bread and a glass of wine. It was a simple gesture that spoke volumes. This initial act of kindness opened a door to the clandestine world of the French underground. Soon they were in the hands of Abel, a regional chief. He formalized their escape route and provided them with civilian clothes. Tams and musette bags cloaked their military identity. The danger, however, was a constant, living thing. Joseph Lubian, another contact, delivered a chilling warning. German searches were intensifying. Roadblocks appeared like sudden, venomous traps. "Word had spread that 2 Americans are hiding somewhere in the village," he cautioned. The words tightened the air around them. Yet, amidst this pervasive threat, trust slowly began to bloom. Hidden in the home of Madeleine Camus and her nervous mother, Madeleine sought confirmation of their identity. She turned on the radio. The sound of American music filled the room. Jimmy's enthusiastic cry of, "Hey, listen to that. Sinatra." And Burnie's plea not to change the channel served as an undeniable truth. Only an American would react that way to the music, Madeleine told her mother. Her initial skepticism gave way to a shared, dangerous commitment. It was Augustin, a man whose ice-blue eyes burned with an intense heat, who presented them with their true purpose. The Marquis, he revealed, had acquired fusils d'Américains et Britanniques et l'autre équipement que nous ne savons pas utiliser. These were American and British rifles and other equipment they didn't know how to use. Madeleine, her voice impassioned, declared, "The Marquis need you." For Jimmy and burning her Vedema, her voice impassioned, declared, "The Marquis need you." For Jimmy and burning her Vedema, her voice impassioned, declared, "The Marquis need," her voice impassioned, declared, "The Marquis need you." Or Jimmy had burning her Vedema, her voice impassioned, declared, "The Marquis need you," burning her Vedema. It transformed them from fugitives to active participants in the resistance. Life in the Maquis Forest encampment was a stark lesson in primal survival. They learned to live off the land. They set wire noose traps for wild boar. They even fished with hand grenades. Meals, often featuring stewed wild boar or cow udders, were prepared by a partisan cook. He affectionately called Jimmy cousin. They were served in rusting World War I tin lunchboxes. Despite the harsh conditions, a deep camaraderie formed. It was marked by passionate debates among the Maquis about tactics and America. They instructed the eager, if often green, resistance fighters in the use of Allied weaponry. Their specialized knowledge in explosives and sophisticated armaments became invaluable. They witnessed the thrill of bonfires lit under a moonlit sky. These signaled Allied aircraft for vital supply drops. White parachutes billowed down with crates of Allied munitions. These included Tommy guns, M1 rifles, magnetic bombs, and Composition C explosives. It felt like Christmas in July. It was a tangible connection to the broader war effort. Their successful demolition of a German ammunition dump, a mission executed with precision and courage, was a triumph. But success bred retaliation. Burnie, frantic, returned at dusk with news of a brutal German counteroffensive. "We gotta get the hell out of here," he warned. "The Germans are coming." The Marquis, facing overwhelming odds, made the difficult decision to disperse. They returned to their civilian lives. "They went home, Jim. They all went home," Scarface had cried. This left Jimmy and Burnie vulnerable and alone once more. They were on the run again. They fled through the unfamiliar, dark forest. Burnie's Cherokee instincts for natural navigation guided them. They emerged into the intense July heat. Their journey continued, sustained by an almost miraculous network of courageous French civilians. They found shelter and sustenance. They were passed like hot potatoes from one safe house to the next. In moments of respite, they shared stories. Jimmy recounted a childhood anecdote about a nun who sewed up his pockets. This was to prevent him from putting his hands in them. It led to Burnie's crude joke about needing to find a woman soon. They reminisced about their paratrooper qualification. It was a grueling 136-mile forced march. They recalled the feeling of invincibility in their shiny boots and wings. They even passed oblivious German soldiers drinking heavily. It was a bizarre tableau of wartime irony. Then, at the home of a kind postmaster, fate intervened. Huguette, the postmaster's niece, had twin pools of ice-rimed water eyes and thick blonde hair. She captivated Burnie. Their flirtation deepened. It culminated in amorous moans outside their window. Burnie's elated declaration was, "I'm in love, Jimmy," in mock exasperation retorted, "Get off me." Such fleeting moments of connection, however, were fragile. Burnie, still morose from leaving Huguette, remained taciturn. They were directed to a farmhouse, expecting hospitality. Instead, they were met by a hostile Russian correspondent and a critical farmer. Their disdain for Americans and boasts of Russian strength quickly brought the room to a boil. "In America, it is my dog eats your dog," the farmer sneered. "We have to get out of here." "Tonight," Jimmy declared, sensing the danger. Their escape was interrupted by the approach of a German officer. In a desperate, violent struggle, they disarmed and killed him. It was a grim point of no return that would forever stain their souls. They took his motorcycle. The irony of using their enemy's machine to flee was palpable. Hidden in a tiny centuries-old stone shelter, their silk map unfolded. It was a gift from a British paratrooper. The map revealed a miracle, Domremy-la-Pucelle, his mother's birthplace. "My God, Burnie, this is a miracle," Jimmy cried. The discovery of his heritage shifted their desperate flight. It became a focused pursuit of safety and profound personal connection. The sweet juice of Mirabelle plums ran down their chins. It was just as his mother had described. It was a sensory link to a promised land. Madame Blondeau, an elderly woman, offered sanctuary. She had travelled on the same train as his parents during their courtship. She offered a flood of memories. Over tea sweetened with peach preserves, she unveiled Lucy's wild streak, her determination, and her profound wartime tragedies. It was a legacy of sorrow that mirrored Jimmy's own. She spoke of the Basilica of Bois-Chenu, where Joan of Arc had prayed. It was a powerful echo of the medallion Jimmy carried. Later, Monsieur Phaebus, a local fisherman, recognized Lucy's name. It was another thread in the tapestry of his mother's past. Despite the inviting sight of village girls swimming in the sparkling river, Jimmy and Burnie remained timid. They were accustomed to hiding. Every interaction was a potential risk. Madame Blondeau arranged for their passage to the farm of John Gossot, Jimmy's cousin. Jean's farm, a fertile acre with a pond and a stream, was a testament to his ingenuity. His truck was powered by a unique charcoal burner combustion system. His wife, Marie-Madeleine, confided her suspicions. Jean, who delivered logs to the German-occupied train yard under their watchful eye, frequently disappeared into the forest at night. His logging, she suspected, was a front for clandestine missions for the Marquis. It revealed the complex, often ambiguous allegiances woven into the fabric of occupied France. To move freely, they needed false papers. Monsieur Buboni, a crystal factory owner, and his associate Christophe risked everything. They meticulously crafted documents. Official seals and stamps would make the cards genuine, Christophe explained. He and Jean shared a light-hearted moment. joking about Jimmy's inability to grow a beard. With these forged identities, they gained a precarious freedom. One day, while delivering logs to the bustling train yard, Jimmy struggled alone with a two-handled crane. A German soldier, observing his difficulty, casually stepped in and helped unload the entire flatbed. It was a moment of intense, precarious tension. Later, Jimmy chastised Jean for the extreme risk. Though silent, Jean later tried to smooth things over. That afternoon, a shared experience of slaughtering a veal-sized calf, followed by drinking fine wine in the barn, helped restore a fragile camaraderie. It was a family tradition Jane had hoped to share with his lost brothers. Another moment of levity occurred when Jean's charcoal burner exploded. It singed off his eyebrows. Jean then led them on a tense mission to a Polish prison camp. Under the watchful eyes of German guards, they retrieved a valuable copper alembic stolen by the commandant. It was a stark glimpse into the black market and plunder of wartime. On the return journey, Jean stopped at a padlocked garage. He dug up a hidden wooden crate. Inside, World War I French rifles and ammunition lay waiting. He handed one to Jimmy and Burnie. It revealed another layer to his complex character. It showed his quiet, dangerous involvement with the resistance. The war's momentum was shifting. Disoriented German soldiers, fleeing on bicycles, motorcycles, and commandeered horses, signaled the imminent arrival of the Allies. Jane, his eyes glittering with hatred, took Jimmy and Burnie to a hilltop overlooking the village. He was preparing to shoot the fleeing Germans with his rediscovered rifle. In a moment of high tension, Jimmy and Burnie intervened. They physically stopped him, arguing against the disastrous consequences for his family. John, initially furious, aimed his weapon at Jimmy. He eventually relented, giving his rifle to Burnie. He would keep the alembic to remember the day. Soon after, Mary Madeline joyfully announced the news. General Patton's army was only a few villages away. A low rumble grew. Burnie identified it as a Sherman tank. Driving towards the sound, they encountered Patton's tanks and other Allied vehicles. GI's machine guns aimed, demanded they put their hands up. "We're Americans!" Jimmy and Burnie cried desperately. They explained their long hiding since D-Day. They were finally recognized and welcomed back into the fold. Their identities were confirmed. The tank commander asked for help locating the enemy. Jimmy immediately volunteered Jean. Jean, knowing the terrain better than anyone, provided crucial intelligence and a map. He guided the Allied forces through the village and to the train station where the Germans had vanished. Jean, receiving a pack of cigarettes for his efforts, valued it like a bronze star. It was a quiet acknowledgement of his heroism and his profound contribution to the liberation. The rumble of Patton's tanks, a sound that had once been a distant hope, now vibrated through the very ground beneath Jimmy Sheeran's feet. It signaled not just the arrival of Allied forces, but his own exhilarating, if disorienting, return to the American fold. After 100 harrowing days as an escaped prisoner, living on raw nerves, and the kindness of strangers, Jimmy and Burnie Rainwater stood before the GIs. They were still clad in their borrowed French farmers' clothes. Hands raised, they desperately proclaimed their American identity. Their French contact, Jean, a quiet hero who had risked everything, offered an abrupt but emotional farewell. It was a handshake that spoke volumes of shared danger and profound gratitude. The small airstrip near Alamps, though reeking of fresh tar, smelled to Jimmy like orange blossoms. It was a fragrance of profound hope and a future he'd almost believed lost. At the processing camp, the chaos of war briefly gave way to a surge of righteous indignation. Seeing German prisoners, Jimmy's anger flared. He accused them, with a raw fury born of deprivation, of stealing his belongings. He demanded restitution. A commander, recognizing the thin line between order and the emotional toll of combat, intervened. He emphasized the need for discipline even amidst the aftermath of battle. But the true balm was not justice, but the simple, profound luxury of a hot shower. After nearly 4 months, it felt like the Ritz. The steam and the scent of clean hotel soap washed away not just grime but layers of trauma. It was here, amidst the mundane miracle of hot water, that Jimmy found his high school friend Bill Hill. It was a face from a world he thought he'd never see again. He learned of other comrades, Ludd, Simpson, Nieper. It was a fragile thread reconnecting him to his past. Their survival, he realized, had been a testament to their unlikely partnership. Burnie, with his Cherokee heritage, was a compass in the deepest forests. Jimmy, with his bold ideas and knack for human connection, was the other half. They were, he mused, the perfect pair. Then came a moment of surreal normalcy. Fred Astaire and Bing Crosby, icons of a world far removed from mud and blood, arrived. They were there for a surprise performance for 70 soldiers. They playfully teased the ragged men about their French pauper appearance. Yet their admiration for the soldiers' bravery was palpable. Astaire, with a wink, even entrusted Jimmy with a top-secret message for his sister, Adele, Lady Cavendish in London. He was wearing his long johns as she'd instructed. It was an absurd, heartwarming glimpse of the world beyond the front lines. It was also an invitation to London. London on September 15th was a shock to Jimmy's system. After weeks in the quiet French countryside, the frenetic urban landscape left him out of syncopation with life. Though offered hotel reservations and new uniforms, he felt conspicuous. He was a soldier without his stripes, a ghost in a world too fast. They soon met Adele Astaire, Lady Cavendish, a regal figure. Her elegant perfume was a potent reminder of a life untouched by carnage. Over dinner and drinks, Jimmy recounted the serendipitous tale of his parents' meeting. It was a romantic echo of resilience. But it was Adele's own story that cast a long shadow. Despite a life of fortune, she had lost all 3 of her children, and then her husband at just 38. This steep drop from prosperity to profound grief resonated deeply, particularly with Burnie. He saw, in Adele's sorrow, how quickly and drastically life could change. It was a gift of seeing things clearly, the transient nature of existence, the fragility of life itself. Crystallized for him, he made his decision. He would accept the army's offer to go home. He would reconnect with his Cherokee people and their ancient way of life. He would find meaning where the war had stripped it bare. Jimmy, however, was torn. His heart ached for his parents, for the normalcy he craved. Yet a powerful, undeniable pull drew him back to his company in Ramsbury, England. He had unfinished business. He had airborne training to complete. He had a mission to see through, fighting alongside the brothers who had become his family. The decision to return, to forego the easy path home, felt right. It brought with it a profound sense of calm. The 2 friends, having survived so much, shared an emotional farewell. They exchanged promises to hang tough and remember the lessons etched into their souls. Jimmy made his way to Ramsbury, feeling a strange mix of freedom and unease. He was unrestricted by an army pass, yet his lack of a uniform made him a conspicuous anomaly. His choice subtly challenged the myth that a soldier, once captured, was out of the fight. For Jimmy, the fight was personal. It was a commitment to his comrades and a defiance of the enemy that had once held him captive. Upon arrival, he reunited with his platoon sergeant, Lud Engelbrecht. After a moment of surprise and a sarcastic jab about Jimmy giving up, Lud briefed him. It was on the ambitious new operation, Market Garden. Lud initially tried to send him home. He pointed out his lack of uniform and squad, but Jimmy's persistent and heartfelt plea, born of his combat veteran status and burning determination, swayed Colonel Moore. A private first-class one moment, Jimmy Sheeran was promoted to sergeant and squad leader. He was assigned to Lud's platoon, ready to jump again. Operation Market Garden, launched on September 17, 1944, was an audacious gamble. It was a plan to ram through Holland, invade Germany from the north, win the war, and be home by Christmas. Could such an audacious gamble truly succeed? It was the largest airborne assault of the war. It deployed 20,000 paratroopers simultaneously. Its aim was to secure a 64-mile-long road and vital bridgeheads across the Maas, Wall, and lower Rhine rivers. Unlike the chaotic, haphazard landing of D-Day, this jump was precisely calculated. It was designed to land machine gunners and their assistants within 50 to 100 feet of each other. They would form tight, cohesive fighting units. Jimmy, weighed down by 50 pounds of gear, landed rough, on the run, weapons loaded, near the town of Zonn. This marked the first day of the offensive. The initial success of securing drop zones, however, quickly dissolved into unexpected difficulties. The Germans, far from broken, stiffened their resistance. It was fueled by a fierce spirit of defending their homeland. They had taken advantage of the airborne delay. They blew up the bridge over the Wilhelmina Canal, sending thick smoke billowing skyward. Company 1 was forced to cross the frigid canal at midnight. They used partially submerged concrete chunks as stepping stones. They were shivering and soaking wet, acutely aware of the Germans reorganizing their defenses. Moving into Eindhoven, a critical industrial town, the division immediately faced heavy resistance. Expert German snipers, hidden in trees, church bell towers and rooftops, picked off GIs. They proved to be effective, efficient, and destructive morale breakers. The Allies had gravely underestimated their enemy. The Germans, recovering swiftly from their initial disorganization, amassed a formidable array of artillery. This included deadly 8.8s. They deployed panzers and even Tiger tanks, capable of destroying entire buildings, to counter Allied advances. The strategic importance of the 4 bridges in the area made them prime targets for tenacious German defense. This ensured continuous brutal engagements. At Veghiel, a German counterattack plunged Allied troops into a terrifying firestorm of shelling. It pinned them down in an area the size of 2 football fields. Amidst this barrage, Jimmy found Ludd calmly eating Limburger cheese. He offered a piece with a defiant, "Here, pruner-face. It's good for you." The whistling and blasting artillery, combined with the roar of tanks, created a terrifying and demoralizing environment. Compounding the terror were the German screaming meanies. These were large-caliber rocket launchers. Their projectiles were drilled to howl and shriek as they rocketed through the air. Their sound often lit up the night sky. It was a truly demoralizing auditory assault. For the next 2 months, the battle for Hell's Highway, the vital supply route, devolved into a brutal, static fight. It was a stark contrast to the initial offensive aims of Market Garden. The landscape, with its pastoral beauty, became a superficial overlay for the grim realities of war. It was marked by dead soldiers and pigs feeding on corpses. The immense psychological and physical toll led to hardened veterans. Some succumbed to stress. Amidst this grinding attrition, acts of extraordinary bravery still emerged. Colonel Robert Zink, commander of the 506th Regiment, was known for his strict discipline and strategic vision. He organized a high-risk patrol across the Lower Rhine. "This is the most exciting patrol I've organized since the operation began," he declared. He stressed, "You men must succeed in locating the British on this patrol. You present their only hope not to be massacred." A patrol including Jimmy, Lud the Face Albers, and Medic Growdy was sent to scout a rickety brick structure, a high ground near the Lower Rhine. Inside, they found a terrified Dutch family. It included a young girl with a severe, infected shrapnel wound. Despite their urgent mission, the soldiers demonstrated profound compassion. They helped the family. Growdy, after an initial reprimand for his poor attitude, applied streptomycin to the injured girl's burning wound. The intelligence gathered by this patrol proved invaluable. It led to direct contact with the Dutch resistance. Ultimately, it led to the rescue of over 100 British soldiers who otherwise would have been massacred. The morning after their return, Colonel Zink commended the squad. He praised their job well done. He highlighted the tangible impact of their small-scale operation. He even expressed a wish to have joined them. This moment shifted the soldiers' perspective from a dangerous mission to one of significant, life-saving value. But despite such heroism, the ambitious vision of Market Garden remained elusive. It was a swift Allied victory to end the war by Christmas. The fighting was prolonged and difficult. It was met by persistent and effective enemy resistance. This was a stark debunking of the initial optimism. The failed gamble of Operation Market Garden had left the Allied forces mired in a prolonged, static winter conflict across Holland. It was a grinding attrition that chipped away at troop morale. Then, on December 16th, the Germans launched their desperate Ardennes offensive. It would become known as the Battle of the Bulge. 600,000 American men would ultimately fight 3 German armies in that brutal winter. 81,000 lost their lives or suffered wounds. The 101st Airborne, still reeling from the prolonged Holland campaign, found itself abruptly thrust into the breach. Rushed into action, the elite Screaming Eagles were committed to hold the critical crossroads town of Bastogne, Belgium. They had woefully insufficient gear. They wore only field jackets, lacking heavy overcoats, adequate intelligence, or the full complement of ammunition, medical supplies and replacements. This deployment, far from seamless, exposed the raw, improvisational nature of war, even for seasoned units. Their journey through the devastated Ardennes, past huge pine trees blasted from the ground by German 88mm artillery, culminated in a psychologically shocking arrival. Bedraggled, traumatized American soldiers, walking wounded with hollowed-out eyes and blood-gashed faces, retreated past them. They desperately warned, "Don't go in there." It was a stark, horrifying welcome to a battle already lost for many. It forced the 101st to scavenge ammunition from the very men they were sent to relieve. Amidst the unrelenting snow, sleet and fog of that bitter winter of 1944 to 1945, the fight for Bastogne became a crucible of ingenuity and defiance. Ammunition and food were critically scarce. This forced meticulous targeting and strategic restraint amidst the encirclement of Bastogne. The harsh weather hammered visibility, making resupply nearly impossible. It ratcheted up the psychological stress to unbearable levels. Yet, even against the formidable German Tiger tanks, the infantry found ways to fight back. They successfully destroyed two of the armoured behemoths. This act, challenging the notion that foot soldiers were helpless against such machines, significantly boosted American confidence. It proved that strategic attacks and ingenuity could inflict damage and bolster flagging spirits. On December 22nd, the German demand for surrender was met with General McAuliffe's legendary, defiant one-word reply. It was nuts. It was a morale booster that galvanized American resolve. It was a rallying cry that echoed the Screaming Eagle's fierce determination in the face of overwhelming odds. The daring jeep stunt, where Captain Anderson and Sean Wall sped a jeep full of wounded GIs into enemy lines, created a vital psychological victory. Soldiers screamed like frenzied Comanches. It pushed back the Germans just enough to evacuate the injured. These small, audacious acts became the currency of survival. The siege of Bastogne was finally broken on December 26th by Patton's 4th Armour Division. By January 9, 1945, the 101st Airborne switched to the offensive. They successfully took Nouville. It was a critical defensive victory in the Battle of the Bulge, but the cost was immense. James Sheeran eventually returned home, but not the same young man who had eagerly enlisted. He carried the profound psychological and physical toll of war and captivity. He was a changed man burdened by trauma. His reunion with family and friends was a scene of emotional release. But it was also the beginning of a complex, challenging recovery and reintegration. A chasm of experience now separated James from his parents. His world had expanded beyond their comprehension. It required a new form of communication and understanding. His mother, Lucy, recognizing his silent distress, eventually addressed her own unresolved grief and secrets about her wartime experiences. It fostered a deeper connection and mutual healing with her son. The emotional and psychological scars of war were not always visible, but they were deeply felt. James's journey home implicitly challenged the idea that soldiers could easily snap back to their pre-war selves. The narrative of James Sheeran, and countless others, underscores the immense human cost of World War II. It is evident in the high casualty rates and brutal experiences, but it also shows the formation of deep, unbreakable bonds and camaraderie among soldiers. His life was irrevocably changed. It led to a more mature and confident individual. Yet he carried the indelible burden of trauma. Decades later, James made a poignant decision. He returned to France to reconnect with his mucky friends and rescuers. This journey symbolized a full circle of gratitude and remembrance. It honored the sacrifices of both soldiers and the brave civilians who aided them. During this poignant reunion, his French friends presented him with his cleaned and wrapped lunchbox. It was salvaged from the war. It was a powerful souvenir of past dangers and present appreciation. James Sheeran's memoir, ultimately, serves as a testament to the courage, resilience, and adaptability of ordinary soldiers in extraordinary circumstances. It fulfilled the author's lifelong dream of sharing his personal testimony with the world.